The Chicago Bulls are looking to be much more aggressive in the trade market as December 15th is just this Friday and lots of moves could be made. I'm your host, Joey Mercer. This is Bulls Digest, and before we get into it there today, I just want to say that about 92% of you that watch these videos are not subscribed. We're trying to hit 1,000 subs here on Bulls Digest very soon. So if you aren't already subscribed to the channel and watch these videos daily, or this is the first time that you've watched and you enjoy what you see, make sure to go down below, hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell for notifications, and every time we upload, which is 7 days a week here on Bulls Digest, you will be notified right away and won't have to search for this content anymore, and you can stay up to date with the Chicago Bulls that we all know and love here at Bulls Digest. So without further ado, we're going to get into the first topic of today, and that is that the Bulls are all in. So they don't really have many options left. It's either we go to a rebuild, a retool. Those are really the only options on the table. You cannot keep the roster the way it is right now. It was a heartbreaking loss against Denver last night in Chicago. It was actually Serbian Heritage Night at the United Center, and Nikola Vucevic was oddly enough ejected in what is known now as one of the worst ejections in NBA history, just for arguing a call against the ref, and was tossed from the game in the second quarter. We still weren't able to come back and win in that game with Jamal Murray and Nikola Vucevic out. So the momentum that we had going forward is kind of killed in its tracks right now, although it came less than 24 hours after an overtime loss to the Milwaukee Bucks that we fought tooth and nail right to the end against. The first thing I noticed was a tweet that led me to an article from Hoops Hype, but we're going to talk about the tweet from Dunk Central first. It says, the Chicago Bulls are looking for win-now players on the trade market, per Mike Ascato. They're looking for players that can help them win now and maybe pick down the line if they can add down to their cupboard. So, interesting way of wording it there for sure. Not the best way of coming out and saying it. It's really, metaphoric. It doesn't exactly say what's happening here. What's happening is they're just looking to right now retool, it seems, more so than rebuild. So basically what they're saying is if we move Zach LaVine, we're looking to get value in return, as opposed to just taking flyers or looking to sell him for pennies on the dollar. We're going to get into more of that right now, as we're going to cite the article from Hoops Hype that has Scotto and Goslan, I believe his name is, that we're talking back and forth about the situation. So first we're going to get into the Lakers side of things, because the Los Angeles Lakers are the team that are to watch when looking for trades for Zach LaVine. First thing I saw was that the Lakers' D'Angelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, and Christian Wood could become available on December 15th. The team with some guys that are interesting when you look at that December 15th date is the in-season tournament champions, the Los Angeles Lakers. There are a couple of guys there that become trade eligible on the 15th. You've got their point guard, D'Angelo Russell and Gabe Vincent, who they brought over from Miami, and you could throw Christian Wood in there as well, who they signed in the offseason. So all those guys, I think, are very solid talents. Christian Wood is kind of up and down. He's really more of just an offensive talent and doesn't get too many things done on the defensive end, as he's a little bit mediocre on that side of the ball. However, he is a solid stretch big, and that is somebody that we could develop into something more as we look for a PF, and he's probably more suited at PF than center, because I believe he's only about 215 pounds at 6'9", which isn't that huge and could definitely be more mobile at that size. When you look at Gabe Vincent, he's played limited time with the Lakers, but in that limited time, he is one of the worst players in the NBA this season, and it's definitely because of a low sample, but I actually mentioned before the season started that Gabe Vincent is a guy that is better off the dribble, as we have those statistics out now, as opposed to the catch and shoot. So playing along LeBron James isn't probably the best situation if they're looking for a guy for catch and shoot only, which is what I feel like they wanted in Gabe Vincent, and just simply looked at their percentages in the playoffs and towards some stretches of last season, not its entirety. But if he was in a situation with the Bulls, I think he could definitely perform better, where he could have the ball in his hands more if we were to move Zach LaVine and get some more shots off, for sure. When it comes to D'Angelo Russell, yes, he is up and down. However, I think he is a really solid talent. He gets to a lot of spots that point guards don't like to get in today's NBA. He really likes to get at that mid-range. He has a slow, methodical play at his own pace game, and I think it's really fitted for the Bulls offense right now, and he could definitely get involved with Vooch in a pick and roll, and I'd like to see something like that. The next thing that I saw in it was, when you mention who the Lakers are targeting, the obvious target is Zach LaVine. Everyone is waiting to count down the days for when the Lakers have enough trade-eligible players so they could potentially trade for LaVine. It's been a month since the reporting came out that he's open to get traded. I listed a couple teams, and mostly some teams like Detroit and Orlando that need some offense. It was a very short list. Obviously, the Lakers were mentioned. Now, as we're further away from that, I feel like the Lakers might be the only team that kind of makes sense for him at this point. If he's going to get traded this year, so the question is, how much is Chicago going to require from the Lakers or any other team to trade him? If they're not getting the type of talent they want, are they comfortable just getting off that money and maybe taking just a little bit of value? That's hard to say right now. I feel like they really should try to get whatever they can for Zach. You do not want to hold on to that contract until the end of the season. Wait for the offseason. It needs to be moved sooner rather than later. So if a solid deal even comes your way for Zach LaVine right now, I think we do need to pull the trigger and ultimately change how this team looks and see how they can perform, and then maybe make some other deals at the deadline if those players don't fit with the new players on the roster. And I think that's what we should do with Zach LaVine right now. So this right here is really interesting, actually, because it doesn't make sense to me for them to just take that for Zach LaVine. I, however, really think that any team, obviously, in the league could use Alex Caruso right now, but giving up LaVine and Caruso just for Austin Reeves and maybe throwing Gabe Vincent, that's not going to get it done. I think they're really undervaluing Zach here, and even Caruso for that matter. Austin Reeves has shown flashes of being very good. Austin Reeves is not an all-star caliber player, and Zach LaVine is a former two-time all-star, and Alex Caruso made an all-defensive team last season. Let's not jump the gun on Austin Reeves. He's had one solid season and is playing good so far this year, but that would really be expecting a little bit too much for him, as I think he's in a very good situation for himself, and I can't see him putting up 20 plus points per game on the Chicago Bulls. I just don't think that would happen. This is not to discredit Austin Reeves at all. I just don't think he's that type of player. I realize he had a really good game the other night in the play-in, but I can't see him consistently putting up big numbers, as this was just a flu game, as LeBron James said, just like Michael Jordan had, where Reeves was down with the flu, took some medicine, had a really good game. Players have good games like this, and Austin Reeves is a good player, but he is not the caliber of player as Zach LaVine or Alex Caruso just yet. He is getting there, but he isn't just yet for Caruso. That would be more of a talent level I would put him at, and not quite of the score of Zach LaVine, as Austin Reeves is a solid defender, but he isn't anything like elite. He's just a little bit above average if you look at the statistics on that. The next thing I saw was, I know Jeannie Buss is a big fan of Austin Reeves. This was a guy that is kind of a developmental story for them as an undrafted guy, and they take pride in that. Lakers fans were saddened to see Alex Caruso go, with Zach LaVine being rep by Rich Paul and Clutch Sports. Obviously, anytime that's the case for representation, his clients always get linked to the Lakers, and he certainly has a few of them now on the team. For the Lakers, sorry, they'd have to decide if having LaVine as the clear third guy at his salary is worth it, or do you try to do it more by committee like they did last year? That trade scenario you brought up is an interesting one, and certainly food for thought. Once again, I think that they're really selling Zach LaVine low, which is why I really want to bring this up and talk about this today more so than anything else that was actually rumbling in the news, is that Zach LaVine isn't necessarily a bad basketball player. He is not a great defensive player, but offensively, he is a top talent in the league. He is a former two-time All-Star, and I keep saying that. People keep forgetting. If you're looking at a guy that's made an All-Star team at all, you can't trade him for, a quality starter role player. You have to get assets back. You can't just flip these guys for somebody that's solid on a contender. If you're playing alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but more so LeBron James, you're going to look a little bit better if you're an Austin Reeves situation. Not a lot of guys can play alongside LeBron, but he can definitely make players look better, like Austin Reeves, and I think that's more of the situation in LA right now. The next topic we're going to talk about today is the current situation in Chicago. How are things looking right now? How is the team? Who is on the table? And who did they talk about on the Bulls side of things and not just the Lakers side of things? Were things discussed a little bit differently because this was the Bulls part of the article? Or were they discussed the same, giving the Lakers or other teams favors as opposed to the Bulls getting value back in return? Well, to look at this, it says the Bulls are interesting because they almost make it seem like they want to keep DeRozan, the older player, and you've got Nikola Vucevic, of course, in his 30s. What's the timeline for Chicago in that sense? Of those guys, LaVine is the youngest. You look at Arturas Karnisovas and Bulls management, and they sold ownership previously when they had Lonzo Ball, that this team was going to be good. Now, Ball's injury was unforeseen, and you couldn't have predicted that would happen, but certainly the ceiling has been lowered for the group. If you're trying to keep DeMar and Vooch, you'd almost be more in a win-now mode. That has been the sentiment that rival executives around the league have gotten. When I wrote the top trade candidates piece recently, we touched on that they're not necessarily looking for straight draft capital. They're looking for players that can help them win now and maybe a pick down the line if they can add to their cupboard. So that's exactly the part that we cited right at the top to do with this article, is where they want win now players, and that has to do with them moving Zach LaVine and the age of the team being a little bit higher in their top players of DeMar and Vooch, depending on who we get back, of course, but I think it still would be if we got D'Lo. He wouldn't be quite the player of DeMar or Vooch, but still a very good player in the NBA for sure. That would be the player that I'd want to target the most on the Los Angeles Lakers, or Rui Hachimura. I wouldn't be wanting to target as much of Austin Reeves because I do think that we would have to overpay for him right now. And Gabe Vincent really would be just a throw-in in a trade, as he hasn't performed very well in very limited time once again with the Los Angeles Lakers, and hasn't done anything in the past for us to think that he is even close to a all-star level player. He is kind of like a fringe starter type of player when he was on Miami and didn't consistently stay in there, and it was quite a low sample size as well. The next thing that I saw in this article was that I want to circle back on the Bulls for a second. Again, with Chicago's future direction a little bit uncertain, it's unclear at this time, but you talk about guys that could hold value for playoff contenders, that could fortify any bench on a playoff team. I wondered about Javon Carter and Torrey Craig on the Bulls, because I do think those guys would have value. I remember in the offseason, Minnesota was also looking at Carter in addition to Chicago. Craig had a number of teams as well because he's a good role player. Those are two names that popped into my mind that I think would hold value if they were on the market and teams would be after. Then the rebuttal was, if the Bulls end up trading a lot of their best players, their starters, LaVine, DeRozan, and Caruso, then eventually that'll probably also extend to some of their bench players. With Carter, there are just so many guards on the Bulls right now. He's been in the rotation, but he definitely feels like he can have a bigger role elsewhere if given the opportunity. Craig is on a minimum deal and another guy you could easily plug in for many other teams, and because he's on a minimum salary, it's very easy to acquire him. With their direction being uncertain, I would definitely monitor those two guys. They could definitely be on the move if they enter that rebuild. And that's true. Nobody is untouchable as we enter a rebuild. I mean, some of the younger guys, maybe like Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, we'd probably try to keep around to do something with. They might have some potential down the road. Right now, I see a lot more out of Phillips than I do out of Dalen Terry. Dalen Terry's been not so great so far, but you never know what those players could turn into, give them more playing time, different players around them, more development there, more time spent on their games as opposed to some of the top guys, and maybe they can really develop into, starting quality players for sure. But when I looked at that part just there about Torrey Craig and Javon Carter being moved, they could definitely be moved. Now, I think that we should sell high if the value is high right now, along with LaVine or along with somebody else. I wouldn't want to just move those guys because I feel like it would either be a lateral move or we would be taking a little less. I don't feel like teams are going to overpay for those guys, but on the low deals, it's really hard to say in the NBA. It's just my personal opinion. This is Joey Mercer. This has been Bulls Digest, and make sure if you like the video to go down and hit the like button, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel. We're doing this every day, and as always, I can't wait to see you in the next one.